Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. We're coming to you tonight live. I said to Nick, we might want to wait a little bit tonight before we go, and I was right because some big news was brewing. Some news that, as Nick can confirm, I actually hinted him to a little bit earlier this week, about 4 or 5 days ago, before it was even in the mix. This Brian Burge trade. I had a little birdie. I'm not going to give away too much more info on that because I want to keep that birdie in the pocket in case some further information comes down the line. But the compensation he suggested ended up being almost exact. And now Brian Burns is a member of the Giants. And I'm told, Nick, that, and I don't want to go too far on this again, I want to keep this info flowing, but I'm told the Giants were not the only suitor for Brian Burns in trades, and they were 5 teams in the mix. And that doesn't surprise me at all for a 25-year-old pass rusher who quite clearly wasn't maybe the best fit for what Carolina was trying to do on the defense side of the ball. He dropped in the coverage a lot last year. I have the stats up. We'll get into them in a little bit, but last year was the fewest pass rush snaps he had as a pass rusher since he entered the NFL, 9 sacks on the season. Go ahead.
It seems odd though. If there were so many suitors, no one could do better than a 2 and a 5th.
That's a lot. That's a lot to give a 2 and a 5. We're giving up 39. It's not 47. It's 39 from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but it's still like this is a 25-year-old star pass rusher. I would imagine there would still be more suitors, and I get that it came with the contract as well. But who wouldn't want to lock up a player like Brian Burns?
Well, I think the factor is, one, like you said, the contract. There's only a certain number of teams who can afford to give him 5 years, $150 million against their cap right now, and the Giants apparently are one of them, which leads me to some conclusions and some thoughts on some other things going on with the Giants' current roster and future players that might or might not be on that roster given this deal. But one, maybe not every team that's in contention can afford him, Nick, and two is the fact of the matter that some people like, look, we may view him as a star or a budding star. I personally do. I think the reason the Giants went so aggressive to get him is because they envision a specific fit in Shane Bowen's system that will unlock him to a different level at 25 years old. But statistically speaking, he hasn't been like a 15, 16 sack Danielle Hunter type production guy. And so, you're not, and though he's young, maybe that was also a factor in why no team offered a first-round pick. But we know for sure this, Nick, because it's already been reported. The Rams offered 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns like a year ago or a little over a year ago. And the Panthers turned down 2 first-round draft picks from the Rams, and now they get a 2nd and a 5th from the Giants. So they're kicking themselves for that.
Giant fans, if you ever want to feel better about the New York Giants' current situation, just look over to Carolina. Just look over to Carolina and see everything that's happened with that team over the last couple of years. Hopefully Bryce Young hits for them.
Yeah, and they have a long way to go there. They added some important piece for Bryce Young and Robert Hunt, but I'll be honest, and we'll get into this as well. I like the 2-for-1 move better for the Giants offensive line, especially if it's Robert Hunt. If it was Eluemunor, maybe that's a different story, which, by the way, the Giants may not be out of the mix on Eluemunor. Let's just keep that in mind, which is crazy to even think about. And that would be the nail in the coffin, I think, for sure, for some of the higher priced players on the Giants' current roster that have contracts they can get out of in coming years. But, the Giants got aggressive this offseason, Nick. And the reason I'm excited about today's moves, I went into this free agency with my mindset being, Nick, if the Giants are light in free agency this year and they don't make a lot of moves, and even if they lose Barkley and McKinney, but let's say they just go offensive line, because offensive line was non-negotiable. No matter what, where you viewed this franchise, rebuild, not rebuild, mid-rebuild, half rebuild, like Edelman, whatever you may have viewed it as, or win now, just need to get healthier. However you viewed it, the Giants needed offensive line help. But to make the move they made, the aggressive move for a 25-year-old passer in Burns, that's not necessarily telling you that they don't believe that they think this is going to take 2-3 years to rebuild, at least not in my mind. And with that said, I'm okay with this. And I was going to be okay if they didn't go crazy in free agency, but I'm okay with this because they're rebuilding it a certain way. They're rebuilding in Shane's image. They're rebuilding it from the inside out. They're focusing on trench players. Brian Burns, edge, 2 offensive linemen, not re-signing a safety for $17 million annually against the cap, and Xavier McKinney, not re-signing a running back for $12 million annually against the cap. That's taking that money, taking those resources. You only have so many in today's NFL with the salary cap, and reallocating them to edge and the offensive line, the inside instead of the outside, with a safety and a running back. And running back can be considered inside, but skill players to me are all outside in type players. So that's where it starts for me, Nick. I just like the reallocation of resources by the Giants and the commitment to really rebuilding this in a certain image.
Yeah, same here. I look at the need over the years for investments in the trenches, specifically on the offensive line. And again, it's not even like the Giants haven't invested in the offensive line. They just haven't hit, right? And
Yeah.
we're hoping that Carmen Brasillo can get the most out of all the young guys that they have there now. And now you can add John Runyan Jr. and Jermaine Eluemunor is a player who Carmen Brasillo has coached at 2 different stops now at this point. He coached them back when they were together in the New England Patriots and then the last few seasons over there with the Raiders. So I too appreciate the approach. I didn't necessarily expect the Giants to do what they did with the Brian Burns trade. I'm for it, man. And I get it, man. Like he might not be a consistent 13. He had what, like 68 pressures and like 11 and a half sacks in 2022.
Yeah, he did. He had a much bigger
Yeah.
year in 2022 and he dropped it. Yeah, go ahead.
No, just think about this from, and again, you don't make a trade like this just because Shane Bowen is your defensive coordinator. But if you do think about this, because I think Brian Burns would be successful in a lot of systems, what did Shane Bowen do so often? What did he do in passing situations, Dan? He was, I'm going to wide 9 your ass. And now you have screaming off the edge, Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns. Before the Giants made this trade, if you were to ask me, who would be one of the best pass rushers for the New York Giants to add to this from a scheme perspective? So try to like not take into account that there are better pass rushers out there than Brian Burns. Brian Burns would be that guy because he is similar to Harold Landry. And we saw Harold Landry thrive in that role throughout the last like 2 or 3 seasons with Tennessee, other than the year where he tore his ACL. So you're talking about Kayvon, Brian Burns screaming off the edge from wide angles, stressing those tackles with Dexter Lawrence as the interior guy who is going to operate as the Jeffrey Simmons type. I just think that is a recipe for success in terms of getting after the passer. And I think there's just so much room to grow from that trio up front with Brian Burns only being a 25-year-old at this point.
Right. And Brian Burns, when he came out of college, he was a player who was number 6 on my overall big board, tweeted a lot about him, even to the point where I actually had his brother reach out, who I was hoping to find on Twitter. And he reached out to me like last year or 2 years ago. I was like, dude, thank you so much. You were always the one pounding the table for Brian Burns during the pre-draft process. I guess he just like in their mind, like these tweets are like, high and they're catching some steam and helping their brother or their client, whatever it may be. But he's like, you always believed in him. And then this was after his like real first breakout with the Panthers. But I have always believed in this player. I love this tape at Florida State. And there were some questions I had about his ability to bend the edge. And those questions were immediately answered at the combine and then carried over to the NFL. It's like you didn't have to wait at all. The combine, everyone was curious about what would happen. And he was 83rd percentile on the 3-cone. And that goes along the lines of a 98th percentile broad jump, 81st percentile vertical jump, 98th percentile 40-yard dash, 87th percentile hand size, wingspan 81st percentile. It's like a built-in the lab type of prospect who compares most to Daniil Hunter and Josh Sweat from an athletic standpoint, but those guys are not even the same athletes that Brian Burns is. And he's turned that into production at the NFL level. People are like, oh, he had 9 sacks last year. You're paying for 9 sacks. It's like, well, he only had 379 pass rush snaps last year. And that was the second lowest of his career and the lowest since his rookie year. In 2022, he had 525. That's a massive difference. It's more than 50% more the year before. And I don't know why he had so few pass rush reps last year, Nick. I'm not exactly sure. But the fact of the matter is that obviously played an impact on his. Yeah, a lot of shit was going wrong with Carolina.
No teams were even thrown on Carolina because they were down so often and they had like the shittiest run defense in the league. Bro, I remember Brian Burns from when I was studying Josh Sweat. So Josh Sweat was this guy at Florida State. Now we know him about the Eagles and he's really accomplished and everything. But when he was at Florida State, he was really injured. I think it was his senior year, maybe his junior year. I went down because he was a highly regarded prospect and I was studying the crap out of Florida State film. And I was like, who the is number 99? Who is this guy? And I think he was either a redshirt freshman or maybe a sophomore. And it was Brian Burns. And that was my first introduction to Brian Burns. And that dude was doing crazy stuff at the college level at a very young age. And now he's on the team that I cover. So I'm happy about that because I do think he's a really good football player. And you can see the mock draftable up on the screen right now.
Yeah, and even last season, when he had his fewest pass rush snaps, this is according to Doug Analytics, he was the 22nd fastest average time to pressure among edge defenders with 35 plus pressures. 60% of his pressures were under 2.5 seconds. 9 to 50 edge rushers in that regard. I believe that's going to be a really good fit, like you said, for being used in wide 9. Like it's just going to be an interesting situation right away for the Giants with him, Dexter Lawrence, and Kayvon Thibodeau on the defense line. I remember we talked a lot last year in our bold predictions about like Giants D-line becomes one of the top 5 in the NFL, and it requires Azeez Ojulari stepping up. And that never happened. And Azeez Ojulari at this point is going to be a rotational player for the Giants. That's clear with this trade. And that's fine, right? Like that's probably better for him. What?
A good one too. If he could
And
stay
it might
healthy.
help his career,
Yeah,
honestly, to not have
exactly.
to play every snap. And I mean, he needs to get lucky and stay healthy, which hasn't been really, it's been really unfortunate for him. He's been injured a lot. And he needs, maybe this will help Azeez Ojulari stay healthy. And I already felt like Azeez could be a nice fit, by the way, given his skill set for Shane Bowen's system. So I just think now you have three potential guys coming off the edge. You can even kick, in my mind, Burns inside on some passing downs. I'm not going to be surprised if I see that at all, given his frame. And given his length and his wingspan. I think that the best is still ahead for Brian Burns. That's why I like this trade. When you go out and you make these kind of trades, I don't want it to be for like 2 years ago, the Raiders trade for Devontae Adams. Yes, Adams was the best receiver in the NFL, but he's an older player and he's turning 28, 29, 30 range. You're trading for a 25-year-old. You've now established your core is all young guys, 26 and under, in Andrew Thomas, Brian Burns, and Dexter Lawrence, potentially also Kayvon Thibodeau. Now, they believe he's trending in the direction. I think he will. You add to the mix Okereke, Banks. You're starting to put together a really, really fire core on the defensive side of the ball, plus Andrew Thomas. And then you see what you can do on offense. Obviously, we'll have to find out. But the core they're building on defense is super impressive to me, Nick. And I'm not surprised they went this direction when I really think about it, because not just because I was tipped off to it, but because remember what Shane did during his time with Brandon Beane? Like, they prioritized pass rushers. They were not, secondary first. They were not corner first. They were pass rusher first. They were trenches. They were defensive line. And I went through a period, Nick, where I was like, oh, you take the corners over the edge because quarterbacks are getting the ball out in under 2.5 seconds. It's not as important. But I've come back. I've come back around to pass rushers for a multitude of reasons, mostly just because I just think the game is just mostly played in the trenches. Most of every single play, the offensive line and the defensive line is in the mix. Not every play is every corner or safety in the mix, or wide receiver for that matter. So I just want to make sure the Giants are going in that path, and they are now. They're going deep into this path of core players in the trenches. And then obviously we'll figure out what happens at QB.
We've also seen now two off seasons in a row, Joe Schoen identify an issue and then go and trade for the solution. So all last year with Darren Waller, I think they wanted a number one, right? They were like, we need a number one. There were no number one wide receivers out there. So they went and they got Darren Waller. And it looks like ultimately that's going to be a failure of a trade. But I still like the mindset. Now,
maybe. I just think he's had a shot. You never know.
Maybe.
Probably.
But even if he has a good season this year, realistically, like, what is it going to mean? He's probably not going to come back next year if he's already thinking of retiring.
True.
Regardless, Brian Burns is 25. Like, this is the type of swing that you take, even in a position that the New York Giants are in where they might not compete and be a Super Bowl contender this year. Like, realistically, that's not going to happen, obviously, right? But you still have this guy now for what, 5 years? What is that contract going to look like in 2 years? That contract might be a huge discount. Yeah, it's the second highest now. But if Brian Burns is playing really well, he might look to restructure that damn thing because the cap is going up and it's going up and the middle class is going to inflate, right? We're seeing guys like John Runyan Jr. get $10 million a year. A lot of people would look at that and be like, oh,
Robert Hunt got crazy amount of money, in my opinion, for Robert Hunt.
Exactly. So you're going to have a lot of players making a lot more money. So you got this guy for 5 years. You got him through his age 30 season. I think that's a damn good risk to take if a lot of people think it's risky.
Yeah, people think it's risky. And it's like, look, we said this last year with the Daniel Jones contract, and it obviously came back to bite us. But when you sign a player to a contract, you're not signing him for past production. You're signing him for future production. The Giants believe that Brian Burns, the production he's going to give them based on their belief in his film, in his age, in his athletic profile, and how they can convert him to the system and how he can fit within the Giants system from a skill set standpoint, that he'll be well worth the contract and more. That's how they're projecting this thing. They're projecting him to be one of the best edge rushers in the NFL on this specific team. And that's not impossible for a player at 25 years old to develop into a different player, especially when he's changing systems. We've seen this throughout NFL history at basically every position.
And dude, like, I feel like just the way this conversation has been not framed, not by you, but just like, it's like, oh, well, he's not that productive. He's pretty damn productive. He's had over 10 tackles. He's had over 10 tackles for a loss in 3 consecutive seasons, 13 in 2021, 17 in 2022, and then 16 in 2023. He had 7.5 sacks his rookie season, 9, 12.5, 8. Like, this is still a pretty damn productive player. And if you look at his pressures, it's like 240 something. It's 25 years old. Like, come on. Like, what are we talking about here?
Yep, exactly. He's going to develop hopefully into a different level. I think that's the point. Like, if he just does that the rest of his career with the Giants, of course you don't want to pay that that type of player, that type of contract. They just don't believe that, the Giants, and I don't blame them. Given his athletic profile, what I saw on tape at Florida State, I haven't really watched yet any of his tape for Carolina. I had a really busy day work-wise. I didn't have time to watch any of the tape. I know you did, Nick, so we'll get into some of that. But, time will we have plenty of time here. We'll be doing that throughout the week. So I don't know exactly the type of player he's been at Carolina. I've seen clips. I've seen breakdowns. We saw the tape against the Giants 2 years ago, Nick. So we know that. He had a really nice sack that year against Andrew Thomas, like a really nice win around the edge. And to beat Andrew Thomas at all is hard to do. He doesn't give up almost any sacks, and he gave a sack in that game. So I'm very high on this specific profile, this athletic profile, and this fit with the Giants. And I love that they're building the trenches out.
I also just love the idea of third down with those three pass rushers out there, because you don't have to. Now, we want Dexter Lawrence on the edge, on the nose, but you don't have to, right? Like, you can kick him and be like, okay, we'll put you as a 2 or a 3 technique, Brian Burns wide, and then Kayvon on the other side, overload. Like, there's just so many different creative things you can do now where the protection is going to be like, I got to block this. Like, how am I going to do this? I just wonder who
them kicking Burns inside with Dex and having Aziz and Kayvon on the outside, because that's not going to surprise me if that happens. Burns with a quick inside step over the guard, and that's it.
There's a lot of different options, and that's what you want to provide your coordinators.
Yeah, this was exciting. I was tipped off a little bit to this, and I shared that with you, Nick, and you were like, "Whoa, really?" And I'm hoping, I'm not going to give away too much, but there's other things I've heard from a similar source, and I hope the other things come true. I'm
tell me
the
all
other
there.
parts of it come true eventually. But this one was nailed, and this one the Giants really honed in on, and they were aggressive in this. They weren't. They were not bidding against themselves. In the past, the Giants have been a team that's bid against themselves. They bid against themselves on the Kenny Golladay contract. They bid against themselves on using a third-round pick for Sam Beal, and that was like the 5th pick of the 3rd round, because as usual under Gettleman, the Giants were picking in the top 10. They bid on themselves against Nate Solder. They bid on themselves in a lot of these deals. This was not a bid on themselves. There were a lot of teams who wanted a 25-year-old Brian Burns. The Giants were the one that got him. They're rebuilding and retooling their core around this player, among others.
David Goodman, thank you so much. He likes the Burns trade as well. Thank you for the donation, David. Says Burns trade is a steal to me. Great trade. I do wish we did more on the offensive line. Went from terrible to maybe just below average. Need to be better than that. That's a good transition into John Runyan Jr. if you want to handle that. A good transition. Thank you for the assist there, David.
Yeah, we can talk about both. We can talk about John Runyan Jr. and Jermaine Eluemunor. Is that how you say it? Eluemunor.
I just say Eluemunor.
Eluemunor sounds cool. I hope that's how you actually say it. And Eluemunor. Those are 2 Giants offensive line signings. The way I see it, David, like, here's what I'm thinking. And we'll see what Eluemunor signs for.
He signed with the Patriots. It was, I think, 3 years, 54 or 50 something.
I was told, okay. That must have happened recently. I missed that.
Yeah,
one.
I think it just happened.
Okay.
Right when we were preparing for the show.
3 years,
57.
Okay.
57.
3 years, 57. So
38 mil guaranteed.
Wow, almost 20 mil a year for him.
Yeah,
which I guess was less than, how much did Robert Hunt sign for? A lot, right?
It was 100 million over 5.
100 million over 5. So I think he might have got less than Robert Hunt, which is crazy, a little bit crazy. I always thought the Patriots were going to resign him. I couldn't understand why the Patriots would ever let him go, and they didn't ultimately. And maybe that's partially why the Giants made their moves that they made, the 2 moves they made today, and with the 2 offensive line. Maybe also that's why they were able to make the Burns trade. I don't know, because let's be honest, the Giants have a lot of cap tied up to Lawrence, Thomas, Burns, and Daniel Jones. That's where their big 4 cap hits are right now. I don't necessarily think they can currently fit all 4 of them in the future. I think this move for Burns was the writing on the wall for a quarterback who has a cap hit of 42 million next year and 58 million in 2026. We'll see what happens there, and if that has any chance of staying on the roster at that price. If anything, I think they would restructure and bring it way down, but we'll see what happens there. And not even restructure, just straight up pay cut to play on this team. Which ultimately, I guess, the people were right. They should have just let him hit the market and had him come back last year like Barkley and McKinney did. But then you risk losing the player, and they did that with Barkley and McKinney. We want to get to both. But on these offensive line signings, Nick, I'll start by just saying this and then turn it over to you. I'm okay blowing your load and going all out for like a massive, this is a term we use in our fantasy league, and I know it has bad connotations. I shouldn't say it anymore here, but going nuts and going for a free agent signing at the offensive guard position. I was okay with that. I'm fine allocating money there. But you know what, Nick? I wasn't really that okay with it in this class. If there's a Joe Thuney, is it Thuney or Thuney? I think it's
Thuney, I believe.
There's a Joe Thuney in the class, go do it. because I think Joe Thuney's at a completely different level than Robert Hunt and Michael Onwenu. But if your guys at your top of your class are Michael Onwenu and Robert Hunt, I'm not going to lose that much sleep over not going crazy. And because all these, the top of each position always gets a crazy contract. Sometimes it's the top two, like in this case with Hunt and Onwenu. Sometimes the top one at a position. We don't know, but it's always the top is going to get the crazy contract. If it's Thuney, God bless, go get him. He's a guaranteed locked in all pro, one of the best guards in the NFL. I don't really think Onwenu or Hunt are some of the best guards in the NFL. They were the best guards on the market, but they weren't the best guards in the NFL. So I just wasn't that down to allocate all that cap space to either of them. I was going to be okay with it if they had done it because whatever, it's offensive line. I just want to fire away and do my best and just keep pounding assets and resources into that until it fixes, basically. But you know what? If it was Thuney on the market, Nick, I would have been pissed. If it's these dudes, I'm just not as pissed. These guys are just not on the level of a Joe Thuney or really anywhere close.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I don't think they're Joe Thuney, but I haven't watched Onwenu yet. Like I didn't dive into the free agents. I didn't dive into their tape because I knew once we signed the guys, I was going to get really down into the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Just off of what I know from their game. Yeah, I would say Joe Thuney is higher than them, but I wouldn't have hated if the Giants went in on Onwenu if he checked all the boxes and all of that, right? Like if he was, a good team player, a good character and all that kind of stuff. Now, the guy we did sign, John Runyan Jr., I have gotten a chance to watch several games of his, and I'm in the process of making a video as well. Look, I think he's a starter, right? He's a functional starter. He's not that exciting, though. He is a player as a run blocker. I really love his footwork. I love the angles that he takes. He played in Matt LaFleur's predominant zone blocking system. He was somebody who could reach, a nose and swivel. And when he maintained a low profile, a low center of gravity, you kind of liked what you saw. But I didn't love his hands all that much. I think his feet are much better than his hands. And I hated how he failed to sustain blocks throughout a lot of the plays that I witnessed going through some of the tape, right? I felt like a lot of defenders were able to slide off his blocks and then make a play. I think he's good on combos. I think he's a controlled athlete. He's coordinated. I do think his location skills when he climbs up to the second level and when he pulls, which wasn't all that often, can be improved upon. In pass protection, I think he is somebody who has solid lower body flexion. He is somebody who can absorb contact, reset himself, get his feet underneath him, and then readjust his hands, reestablish that leverage. Appreciate all of that about him. Again, though, the hands aren't all that great, right? It's much more of a foot type of stuff. He's not really powerful. He's not a guy who's going to run through you, right? So it's not necessarily somebody to me who inspires, but I think he's a functional athlete, a functional player, and somebody that I would say would probably have been the best guard on the Giants last year. And a lot of people would be like, well, hope so, right? It's like, yeah, but Justin Pugh wasn't like terrible, right? I still think Runyan Jr. is better, but I don't think there's probably a lot of Packer fans out there that are like, oh, damn, we lost John Runyan Jr. It's one of those type of situations where it's solid. $10 million a year, it's a lot, but you get it. You're paying these guys at this point. I don't think he's all that inspiring, but he's an upgrade.
I think that's fair. I think ultimately when we do this podcast, Nick, there are going to be podcasts that love every signing and love every move. And that's not going to ever be our podcast. You can get that anywhere you want on Giants Twitter, where everything's amazing. Everything was great. We're going to try to look at it subjectively. We're not always going to be right, too. We liked a lot of things that have turned out to be bad. Not like necessarily the Jones contract, just like other things that we've been high on that just didn't work out. And I think ultimately it's hard to not be high on things. Brian Bird's trade, though, to me is just a great knockout deal. So as far as this goes, John Runyan, you mentioned something that was interesting to me. You said Packers fans probably aren't going to be, too, worried about losing this player. And there's a reason why. And I felt this was kind of interesting, Nick. Last season, he started every game, Runyan, but he began rotating out in the second half of the season. Second-year guard Sean Ryan, a player we both loved film of. And
UCLA,
I don't get somehow the Packers are just unreal at drafting O-line and receivers. It's actually annoying to me how good they are. From Tom, who we knew was good out of Wake, and we knew he was a pass protector, to John Runyan, round 6. It's a round 6 pick they hit on. Sean Ryan, Elgin Jenkins, who they actually had to use decent capital on, but is obviously an amazing player. Like, to me, like if Elgin Jenkins hit the guard market, Nick, I'm okay going hard for that. And I would have been okay with Onwenu or Hunt. Not really Hunt at that price, actually. Let me just be clear. I would have been okay with Onwenu at that price. But like if Elgin Jenkins hit the market, that's the type of like, fine, fire away. And I would have rather had him maybe even than Burns. But like, I just don't view those guards as top of the market. But point being, like, they've drafted well. That's a good sign. And he played in the Michigan system. John Runyan, which I also really like because I feel like
as a
Michigan is a
tackle
new
too.
factory for offensive linemen. I've seen a lot of good, and I've heard their coach is amazing there. I don't know too much about him, but I've heard it's amazing. But look, he rotated out for Sean Ryan this year, and eventually the snap counts were 50-50 toward the end of the season. I thought that was really interesting when it came to Runyan. But statistically speaking, everything you broke down from his film seems to align with how the stats have played out, as in the sense of he's more of a pass blocking guard than a run blocking guard. That's what he's going to bring to the Giants, pass protection. And quite frankly, I'm ready to make that transition on with Brasillo on what kind of lineman we bring in and what we prioritize, being pass blocking over run blocking, assuming he can be a good pass blocker, which is not a guarantee. You never know. We like Lewinsky coming in. There's things to like about that. He was an epic disaster. You never know. But statistically speaking, he doesn't take a lot of penalties, which I like. He had 6 penalties last year. He doesn't give up a lot of sacks. He gave up 2 sacks last year. According to Bobby Skinner of Talking Giants, in 2023, 2022, and 2021 combined, he gave up just 7 total sacks, just 12 total quarterback hits, and only 39 total quarterback pressures. That's on a 3-year sample size, though. Of course, like I mentioned, last year he began getting subbed out and rotated in for Sean Ryan. So just some stats to go over it, but I do like that the move for them is to kind of prioritize pass protection at this point over run blocking.
Yeah, I'm somebody who likes both, but I don't think
Yep.
he's a terrible run blocker either. Like, he's not terrible. It's just I think a lot of Giant fans had Eluemunor and a lot of these types of guards in their mind, and this is
Right.
a downgrade from that. But again,
Yes.
this is a player who is better than Ben Bredesen, his teammate in college, right? This is a player who is, I would say, better than Justin Pugh, but maybe not enough to really move the needle to where you're getting really excited. But you're going to plug him in and you're going to be like, okay, we have it figured out. Not at right guard. That's good. And it could assist Evan Neal if he is really good in pass protection. Because I think one thing that's been the problem with the Giants' right side of the line is Evan Neal has had a slow start. That's obvious, right? But I think him not having that stability at right guard has really affected his development. And I think we all expected Mark Lewinsky to be that guy, and it just wasn't, right? Mark Lewinsky couldn't protect either side of him. And people, if he didn't square you up and frame you perfectly, you could get to the half man so easily and you're losing, right? Like John Runyan Jr., he's going to be better in that regard. And John Runyan Jr., another thing that was evident to me throughout the film is he's smart, man. He has good eyes and he's aware of what defenses are throwing at him. So that should help Evan Neal if Evan Neal is the right tackle, or depending on what happens, could it be Jermaine Eluemunor, who got paid $7 million a year on a 2-year deal, which was when I first saw that, I was like, oh, okay, that's a decent chunk of change for a swing tackle. But I also am a big believer in the swing tackle position. I think every Giant fan should be at this point.
Yeah, one more note on Runyan before we move forward. He can also play left guard and has played left guard.
Yep.
I'm not quite sure where he's going to play for the Giants. I think you're probably right. Right guard is probably where he'll be, but I'm not. But we'll have to kind of see how that all shakes out. And according to Doug Analytics, John Runyan's 3.61 seconds time to pressure ranks second best among all guards in 2023 with at least 200 pass block snaps. So second best in allowing time to pressure. He also ranks 7th for guard pass blocking efficiency in 2023, 10th in 2022, and 8th in 2029 out of all guards. 928 snaps in 2023, despite starting to get rotated out there toward the end. So just some interesting stats on him. Again, these are just like stats and grades and stuff that, can be, in my mind, a little bit subjective based on who's grading it or how the system is set up, especially with ESPN's pass block win rate. But clearly, an example, at least, along the lines of what this guy can do for the Giants in year one. And he's going to be a starter, by the way. I mean, you don't pay somebody 3 years, $30 million not to start on your offensive line. He's locked into a starting role. Lewinsky, we thought would be locked into a starting role for a while, ended up not like even being a starter for like probably the majority of his contract, or basically about even, I would say, on when he started. I don't think that'll be the case with Runyan, but it does take us to the next I shouldn't say tackle, next tackle with guard experience. And that's another common theme between these two signings. There are 2 offensive linemen who have experience playing multiple positions, and that's Eluemunor. And I think what you said, Nick, nails it here. When it comes to quarterback 2 and swing tackle, they're so important, the positions, that you might as well spend on them and allocate your cap space there. And that's what the Giants essentially are doing here by signing Eluemunor with Evan Neal still on the roster. And they're projecting Evan Neal to start in 2024 and play a lot better, they hope, with a new offensive line coach. But now they have some actual real insurance if he doesn't. And a lot of people, have used last year's stats from, why am I saying, Tyree Jackson. Why am I blanking on his name?
Yeah.
Not Tyree Jackson. Yeah. The right tackle for the Giants. I don't know why I was thinking of somebody else.
Oh,
But
Tyree
not
Phillips.
Tyree Jackson. I'm thinking of the
Tyree
quarterback from
Phillips.
Buffalo. Tyree Phillips. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the quarterback from Buffalo who played tight end. But
Yeah.
Tyree Phillips, a lot of people have used like argument of Tyree Phillips, like this is part of why, you can't look at what Tyrod Taylor did because Jones had Neal and he had Tyree Phillips. I'm going to be honest with anyone who thinks that. If you watch the tape, Tyree Phillips was pretty damn bad last year for the Giants. He was much better the year before. But last year, Tyree Phillips, I thought, was not a good offensive tackle. Like, he wasn't losing as glaringly as Neal as far as just like looking stupid on tape, but he was getting pushed back into the lap of the quarterback. Right. That's part of why people don't
The way
like
you
Neal.
said that was funny.
Yeah, but like that's part like Neal has those reps that where he's just like beat immediately and he's like and he looks like he's just off balance and not there. Tyree didn't have as many of those reps, but he didn't like Phillips didn't have as many of those reps, but he had a lot of reps where he was just walk back into the quarterback, walk back into that, bull rushed right back in, providing the quarterback no pocket to step up into and forcing the quarterback to throw from a different base, which you don't want as a quarterback. And he wasn't good in the run game either. Phillips was not really an upgrade. They needed something better. If Neal fizzles out and if Neal gets injured again, like he has been in the first two seasons, or just plays bad again, they need a real right tackle to come in that's not Tyree Phillips, in my opinion. And that will be, hopefully, Eluemunor. If not, Eluemunor plays guard potentially as well. We don't know. He might play left guard or right guard for the Giants as well. And they could kick Runyan over to left guard, put him at right guard. There's flexibility now with this signing.
There is. I'm going to run a bunch of John Runyan plays for the people who are in the live stream. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. He's number 76. He's always playing right guard on these plays. See, I like a play like that right there, man. He's able to get his hips around and then kind of steer. And that was Aaron Donald he was going up against. But yeah, I'm right there with you with Eluemunor. I thought $7 million was it was a solid chunk of change. I'm not going to lie, but it's okay with the cap going up. And I do think it is very important to have a familiar, comfortable player who is a professional, who is going to buy in and is going to do whatever you ask. This is somebody who played left tackle last year for the Raiders when Colton Miller ended up going down. He played right tackle.
Right.
I think the 2 years previous he played left guard. So he has all that experience, like you mentioned before. So I'm okay with that. I'm hoping Evan Neal seizes the day, but if he can't, Eluemunor is an upgrade from what I've seen and what I understand over Tyree Phillips. I haven't gotten to the tape quite yet though, so I really need to dive in and substantiate that.
Yeah, I mean he's taken the vast majority of snaps at right tackle. But he's played over 500 snaps in his career at right guard, so it's not like he can't do that. He's been better at tackle. He's 900 plus snaps in each of his last 2 seasons for the Raiders. So he's been on the field a lot for the Raiders. He obviously comes over with Carmen Brasillo, the Raiders offensive line coach, who's now the Giants offensive line coach. We talked about on a previous pod how that does give offensive linemen a leg up because what he's going to be teaching these offensive linemen and how he's going to be teaching it, Eluemunor is already going to know. And he's already going to have that leg up because of that. So I think he's going to be someone who you could put in there if you need to. And that's fine. What did Joe Schoen do last season? And what did we knock him for? Not after the fact, but, during and after the fact. And what did he even admit in his post-year presser, Nick? He said, I could have done better on the offensive line. We had injuries there, but we weren't really well prepared for those players who went down. And that wasn't easy to do. The Giants didn't have $1 million in cap space. They wanted to get a weapon like Darren Waller. They wanted to get an inside linebacker like Bobby Okereke. They couldn't obviously afford to go back to the well with Jalen Smith as your Mike or Jared Davis, who got injured in the preseason. So they spent their resources on what they could, and they weren't prepared for situations on the offensive line that can arise from an injury standpoint. Well, now they are prepared, right? Like Eluemunor is a guy you can put in multiple spots on your offensive line if you have injuries. Runyan's going to be a starter, but now you have guys like Azudu and Bredesen who can come in and be backups potentially for you, or depth if you need them if there's an injury. So I just think overall for me in this specific market, I'm not as pissed about missing out on the top end guys. Again, if it was Elton Jenkins or Joe Thuney, yes, I would want that. But I almost rather kind of have 2 for 1 here, Nick, with 2 for the price of 1, or even 2 for cheaper than the price of 1 between these 2 offensive linemen they signed today, because depth is really important for the Giants. They need guys with starting experience on their roster. Josh Azudu did not have a lot of starting experience, right? There's players on this roster that played last year, even Bredesen to an extent, that didn't have a ton of NFL snaps under their belt. Eluemunor, like I said, 900 plus in the past 2 years, and the same goes for Runyan, a lot of snaps under his belt.
Yeah, he played over 1,000 snaps in the last 3 seasons, John Runyan Jr. So you have that type of experience there. So I don't know if I'm sold on either, like, should have went all in on one guy or 2, but I like the fact that you diversified your options essentially, right? And you got 2 guys who are at least competent. We'll see exactly what happens. I still think you need to have some investments on the offensive line, though. I'm still on investing in the offensive line, and they shouldn't be done at this point. And all this was possible too. I'm not sure what direction you want to go, though, But holy crap, man, Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney. I don't know. You wanted to cover that at the end, or you want to dive into that now?
Well, I want to say one more thing on Eluemunor and what you, and your point you made about being done or not done on the offensive line. It will be interesting now because they did give up pick what I believe is 39 in the Brian Burns trade. So they have one more second round pick, the Seahawks pick, and they have their first round pick. And they don't go line with either one. Maybe they'll do it in round 3 or 4 or 5 as a developmental piece, Nick. But it will be interesting. They have fewer resources now to kind of get all the things they need, I would say, between safeties, wide receivers, offensive line. But I would agree with you. I hope they're not done on the offensive line as well. But one more thing on Eluemunor I thought was interesting. Growing up, he played rugby and cricket and didn't become interested in American football until after watching the Dolphins-Giants game in Wembley in 2007.
Dude, I remember where I was when I watched that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, dude. I remember that game very well. Eli Manning had a rushing touchdown where he looked like he was going to shit himself throughout.
You're not overseas yet at that point?
No, I wasn't. We were in high, or I don't know if we were in the same grade. I was in high school at that point, though.
Okay.
That's 2007.
Yeah. Okay.
Cleo Lemon was a starting quarterback for Miami.
Oh, Cleo Lemon started that game? Holy crap.
I believe so.
That's wild. I do remember Eli's rushing TD in that game. It was like the longest bootleg rushing TD, longest developing bootleg rushing TD in the history of football. Eli Manning getting out there, but he did win the edge somehow, just barely got to the pylon. But yeah, so just one interesting thing. He has that rugby background there. But yeah, I think we can turn the Giants still have another signing I want to get to. So let's actually do that first, and then we'll get to what happened with Barkley and McKinney today. And then we could take some questions if we still have some time there. But the Giants replaced in a sense, but I wouldn't call it replaced, but added a running back, Devin Singletary, 3 years, $19.5 million, but probably just a $16.5 million deal. The 19.5 is if he reaches a bunch of incentives. The Giants have been doing that with their backs with the incentives, starting with Barkley last year. Singletary gained more rushing yards than expected. That's an advanced stat, rushing yards over expected, that, NFL Next Gen Stats created to try to determine a running back's value independent of his blocking. And according to that stat, he gained more rushing yards over expected in 11. He did it in 11 games in 2023. That tied him with the most among running backs with Christian McCaffrey for yards over expected. And so, they're getting a player who Joe Schoen has experience with, drafted in Buffalo. And we said it the whole time, Nick, the Giants are probably going to sign a veteran running back if they let Barkley go for the sole reason of they don't have a lot of experience in the position. And they need someone who can help in pass protection. Oh, my only comment on it, Nick, is this. I'm fine with it, and I think Singletary has some juice, and he's an interesting player. At running back, it's probably a market I would have waited out and tried to just sign a veteran toward the end of it and really focus to the draft, Nick. But the Giants specifically like Devin Singletary, so there's a reason they went out and got him. So I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but this is, of all the moves they made today, this was definitely my least favorite, just because, and not because of the player, mostly just because I would have preferred to just wait out the running back market. I think at the end, there's going to be a lot of really, really cheap veteran deals.
I don't think that's a terrible take, what you just said, but I actually really like Devin Singletary. I've kind of been like a little bit of a fan of his from afar. Smaller than you would expect. He's only like 5'7", like 203 pounds. I just think he's an overall good running back with just the nuances of playing the position, the footwork, how you press the line of scrimmage, how you manipulate linebackers and attack gaps, contact balance. I think he has a lot of those things in a smaller package. Now, I haven't seen his tape to evaluate the pass protection aspect of that. I do know he's an adept receiver. I know he's a deceptive receiver, and he's also good between the tackle, and he does well when he's attacking on the edge too. If it's an outside zone or a power gap, he can do all of those things. So I like the player. I do appreciate though your comment that you could have waited. To me though, as I think you said this just insinuates that, hey, I don't know what that was. This just insinuates that was that on your end?
No.
All right. But this just insinuates that they really wanted Devin Singletary, and he was the answer to Saquon Barkley leaving. Get it out.
Okay. Devin, yeah, I agree with that. Look, they wanted Singletary. They pinpointed him as a player. And I think everything you said is correct. Like from the film I've watched, I think he does. And that's a Dan Schneider thing right there, being able to press the line of scrimmage, use your feet, set up your blocks, and process. I always believe that processing is the most underrated trait for running backs among most fans who just kind of look at size, speed. What do you have? Can you break up big plays? This and that. You force him his tackles. And I think it helps him force him his tackles at times, but I also just think it helps him kind of create space and understand space. Don't laugh, buddy. That wasn't on my end. Create space and understand space. I don't know what that was, what you're even talking about, but it wasn't on my end. And so they went out and got their guy at the running back position, and that's fine. I just feel like this is a market you probably could have waited out. And I'm curious to see how some of these other deals shape up, like the Eckler deal that Washington gave. I would imagine it was for more. But I'm also curious, like, there's going to be guys that are cut, like Joe Mixon and all these, like, salary cap casualties. Those guys are going to end up signing, Nick, for like 2.5 million, 3.5 million on 1-year deals. What are you laughing at over there?
I'm just having fun in the comments. I feel like they're unprofessional.
What are the comments saying?
They're saying that you're gaslighting everybody right now.
All right, I'm just gonna be honest. I did rip one right there. I did not think that was gonna be picked up by the mic, but I just had a post gym protein shake. It's not sitting great,
dude. You don't need to make excuses.
Heavy leg day. I had to put 2 scoops in there.
Golden big fart conspiracy, David S says.
It was, and I could have just let this be turned into a conspiracy. I know Adam Levin has been I'm not Adam Levitan has been, there's been some fart conspiracies on his show with Evan Silva that he's denied. I'm just not going to come out and deny it. I'm just going to admit it. It happened. I didn't think it was going to get picked up by the mic at all. I was shocked when I heard you say you heard it.
It threw me off my entire train of thought.
We just had a heavy protein shake. It might not be the last. It might not be the first. Whey protein doesn't sit that well, but I need it because I need to put on gains. You said leg day. I'm not just going to do a whole leg day like that and then just do a podcast for an hour and a half and not do any protein.
Honestly, if you weren't farting after the protein shake, I would have concerns. I'd be like, there's not enough protein in there.
Exactly. But yeah, they went out and got their guy with Singletary. I'm not going to knock them for that fully, but again, I just would have probably preferred to let the market play itself out. Again, I just think guys like Joe Mixon is going to be cut and he's going to get a $2 million deal. Like Singletary, they might feel has more juice left than Mixon. That's fine. But there are veterans, I think, that are going to be pretty cheap on this running back market toward the end.
So with Singletary too, man, and he's only 26. And I think they view this like, hey, we don't need to really worry about running back unless we want to draft somebody. If we don't have confidence in Eric Gray, bring him in. And if he's better than Devin Singletary, fine. But this is a low cost addition for a running back that we trust. Let's just plug that hole with somebody we both love. And he was productive. And Brian, like, I don't know if I knew this until I looked at the stats, but last year, from a rushing standpoint, was his worst per average. It was like 4.1 yards per carry, which isn't terrible, but it's not great. But with Dable from 2019 to 2021, he was averaging 5 in 2019, 4.4 in 2020, and then 4.6 in 2021. And then in 2022, he was averaging 4.6 as well. He has 24 total touchdowns, over 4,000 yards on the ground. Like, he's kind of been a quiet, productive back that I don't think a lot of us respect, because in Buffalo they added Zach Moss and we all expected Zach Moss to be that guy to kind of take it, but it was really Singletary who seized the day there. You catching up on the comments?
Yeah, just reading the comments and laughing. Oh, dude, I can't believe that happened. Look, I didn't think the mic was going to pick it up. My bad.
Aren't you glad you upgraded your mics? That's so funny.
I did get to see, since I did check the YouTube for the first time, we had 945 viewing. That's fucking awesome.
I want to get to 1,000, man. I want to get to 1,000.
I don't think we've ever gotten to 1,000. Let's get to 1,000 on here.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, you just gotta will people in there.
I'm gonna type. You talk. I'm gonna type something out real quick on Twitter to get more people.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, so Devin Singletary, yards after contact on his career is 3. Last year was 2.88. 2022, 2.92, but in Buffalo was always over 3. He has 203 missed tackles forced through his career. He has operated almost 50-50 in power gap and zone schemes, 477 power gap runs in his career, 460 zone runs throughout his career. So I like the player. I do understand, though, again, what you were saying, but I do appreciate the player, Devin Singletary, and hopefully he just doesn't fumble, because that's my one concern with him. And I think it was better last year. I think let me pull up his PFF again. He only had 1 fumble last year, but in Buffalo, he had 3 in 2022, 5 in 2021, 1 in 2020, and 4 in 2019. So that's one issue that would really piss me off if he comes in there after I'm kind of praising him a little bit and he starts fumbling the ball. I'm going to be pretty mad about that.
Yeah, true, because they obviously believe that he's somebody who can come in and be secure with ball security, but also like help them in pass pro. I want to talk about the 2 players the Giants lost, though, today. And we're going to start with Saquon Barkley, who, there were rumors earlier in free agency that he was interested in potentially signing with the Eagles. And hold on, Dan Duggan just tweeted something. I just want to make sure. Nope, it's nothing. News-wise, you always want to see to make sure you don't miss any big news on these types of things. But Dan Duggan came in. I'm sorry, not Dan. The reports came in and suggested that Barkley and the Eagles had mutual interest. I kind of poo-pooed it, Nick, at the time, and maybe even on this podcast. And I was like, this is BS. Howie Roseman doesn't pay for running backs. And then it ended up coming true. Howie Roseman did pay for a running back, and thought that was a really interesting move for the Eagles to actually allocate resources and cap space to the running back position, something they've quite literally never done in Howie Roseman's tenure. I would have just expected them to kind of maybe make a trade for a DeAndre Swift type again, give a late 5. John Kirk's smart against get over 1,000. It's gonna, if it happens, it's gonna happen naturally. But I will lean into the mic a little bit next time. No, I'm kidding. But Poo on the brain, says David. But listen, I didn't expect them to allocate resources to running back, but now that they have, I feel like the Eagles are kind of pushing a little bit. They're kind of getting a little bit aggressive. I'm not so sure that's how he's built out the team, by like these types of aggressive moves. We'll see if it works out for them. And obviously,
it's all
Barkley,
timing. It's all timing based. Like right now, I think it's not necessarily that the window is closing, but they're in their winning window.
Closing though. It is kind of closing.
They still, I mean, Jalen Hurts is still young. AJ Brown is still
open.
Young.
It's just starting to, I should say, starting to
it's
close.
It's starting to, it was open. It's going to be ajar soon, maybe. Right. So, but like the way I look at it is like, this isn't necessarily a move that Howie Roseman has made in the past, but right now it's like, we know that they wanted to upgrade the running back position last year. So they brought in freaking DeAndre Swift, and it was solid, right? Saquon Barkley is a much better player than DeAndre Swift. And I think this is going to take a lot of pressure off of Jalen Hurts. And now we get to see Saquon Barkley behind a really good offensive line. They just re-signed Landon Dickerson. I get they don't have Travis Kelce, but they've been replenishing their offensive line with talent. They drafted the kid out of Alabama last year. They had the other kid, the one from, I think, Nebraska, a couple of Cam Jurgens a couple of years ago. So now we're going to see Barkley behind that line with AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. Like, that is a powerhouse offense right there in Philadelphia.
I saw a stat where the Giants last year gave Saquon Barkley the third fewest yards before contact of any offensive line, and the Eagles are going to gave him, if he was on the Eagles last year, would have the third most yards before contact. And we saw that with DeAndre Swift. I mean, there were so many gaping holes for him to run through, and just easy money runs for him. And Barkley is going to be good on this Eagles team. I mean, it's with an offensive line like that and two outside receivers like AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, like there's no attention. He's going to have the least attention of his career paid to him.
So what's your take on the whole Saquon Barkley thing? I think I saw Tiki Barber trending, and people in the comments were saying that he said, like, you're dead to me or something. I didn't see him say that directly, so don't hold me to it. But what's your take on that whole situation?
Who said? Oh no, I think Tiki Tiki is a radio host. When you're a radio host and you're doing it WFAN, unlike Nick and I are sometimes we have plans coming in, but for the most part we are, Curb Your Enthusiasm style ad-libbing this. We don't have but they're doing that all day. We do it for an hour. They do it all day. So like when you're doing that stuff all day, things are going to come out of your mouth that you regret saying. I already know that just from doing this for 45 minutes or an hour. Can't imagine doing it for hours.
I don't know if it's your mouth that's going to be regretting it.
Yeah. I mean, I thought when you were talking about the Eagles window constricting, I was going to get a joke there, but it is what it is on that front. I did not think that was getting picked up by the mic, but it is what it is. But, when you're doing that as a radio guy all day, you're going to have some moments like Tiki had today. I'm sure maybe he regrets saying what he said, but to Saquon, he views Tiki now as a fake guy, because I'm sure Tiki's been nice to Saquon's face when he sees him. And then he says something like that bothers Saquon. And I'll be honest, like I see it both sides. Like to me, on one side, I see Tiki's point. If you build your whole career out with one team, they drafted you, they've given you a lot, and not really, they didn't really give you any money, but they gave you everything else. You're the number one jersey sale guy. John Mara loves you. The fans love you to an extent. I mean, I think Saquon has seen some of the negative stuff said about him as well from fans. If you go to your rival team, you're going to take some crap for that. That's how life works. Like, that's just how it is. You got to have thicker skin than that. But at the same time, from Saquon's standpoint, to me, Nick, he didn't do anything wrong. Like, he went and played instead, after a career of playing behind the god-awful Giants offensive line, he went and played behind a really good offensive line. Okay, 1. 2, after a career of being in meaningless games from October on, basically from Halloween on, he went for a team that's in the mix every year and is probably going to be in the divisional round or better next year. Maybe not if they regress, but potentially win the division again. Okay, 2. 3, in addition to the O-line upgrade, in my mind, at least, and I think the mind of anyone who can look at this rationally and critically, he's going for a major passing game upgrade. Like, yes, the passing game for the Eagles regressed last year, but it's still light years better than any passing game he played for under the New York Giants. And what we've always said is what's going to make Saquon better is not, having wide receiver, having this and that, or, having defenses play more cover two. It's going to be, or safeties back, cornerbacks. It's going to be a passing game that forces defenses to cover all areas of the field. And with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown out there and enough vertical shots that Hurts has taken over the last few years, they're playing back those corners and safeties. They're giving that space. They're covering all areas of the field. You have to cover every inch with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown out there. You didn't have to cover every inch against the Giants. You have corners playing trap two coverages on cover two. You have everybody driving downhill on the line of scrimmage at all times.
1,000, baby.
Saquon Barkley.
1,000, baby.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. That is
appreciate
lovely.
everybody viewing and listening right now. Cool. But look, the situation, bottom line, the situation is 10 times better, 1,000 times better for Saquon in Philly than it ever was from New York. So I don't blame him for like picking the best possible situation. And like he said, when he said, I don't think he said it in the tweet that you have up there on the graphic, but he said something along the lines of, I took the most money that I wasn't offered this from the Giants. Like what the Eagles gave him, the Giants did not match. It's not like he took the Eagles deal instead of the Giants deal. Though I wouldn't even blame him for that, to be honest, dude. Like, would you rather play behind that O-line in that situation? Like, how is that? I just think a lot of fans believe these players should have a loyalty toward their teams that the teams may not pay back toward the players.
Of course. So for context for the listeners on the podcast, Tiki said on air, "You're dead to us, Saquon. Good luck. You're dead to me." And Saquon responded with, "You've been a hater since I got to New York, and all the dead to me talk. Don't smile in my face when you see me." And it's like a story on Twitter right now, just for context. Now, I kind of share the same exact opinion as you with this, man. Like, if I'm Saquon Barkley, you got to go and get your bag. You got to go and do what's best for you. But I also do not begrudge any fan who wants to be like, yo, what the hell, man? Twice a year we got to play. You're going to the dark side. Did Saquon ever even beat them? I think the one time, and I'm not even sure if he was healthy for that year. The 4 interception Jalen Hurts game.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I understand why fans are frustrated by it, but I mean, ultimately, Saquon, dude, do you, bro? Of course, man. Get your bag and have fun running behind that offensive line. I hope you don't win a Super Bowl, of course, because I hate the Eagles.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And thank you. Shout out to Carl Banks, who just retweeted my tweet where I said, we're still going live, trying to get to 1K viewers the first time, which we did, by the way. So thank you, Carl Banks, for retweeting that and getting that out to more people who now could potentially be watching in with us. But yeah, look, I'm never, you know me, Nick, I don't want to tell a fan how to fan. You can fan however you want to fan. And you and I are big believers in that. We don't like the gatekeeping of the fans that we see a lot on Giants Twitter. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't be mad at Saquon, or you shouldn't have hurt feelings about it. You can. I'm just saying from my standpoint, I was just speaking specifically and personally for me. I don't blame him for what he did. I think he did the best possible thing for Saquon Barkley. And to be quite frank, if I was in his position, I would have taken more money from the Eagles than the Giants were offering me. Though, according to Ryan Dunleavy, I don't know if you saw this, Nick, but I don't know if this is a true report or not. You never know the reports. People are hearing things from agent side. The people are hearing things from the team side, and some things are true, some things are not. But according to Ryan Dunleavy, who reports on the Giants and is a very accurate reporter, he said the Giants never made Saquon Barkley an offer, which I thought was really interesting. And I don't know if that means they let him hit the market, Nick. He came to them with the Eagles offer and they said, that's it. Or if just during the process at any point, the Giants never made any kind of offer. But if that's true, that says a lot, I think, about the direction they were going in. And it says even more to me about, well, how can I blame Saquon Barkley then? In that scenario, I can't personally.
Yeah. I mean, I love what Shane, I appreciate what Shane did. You're not investing in positions that are a little bit more replaceable, right?
And maybe not in on the play, every play, safety, running back.
Now, I'm a little upset that Xavier McKinney is not going to be here, but I didn't want Joe Schoen to allocate $17 million of the cap there. But now it opens up a lot of questions. And what the hell are you going to do at safety?
Well, that's a good question.
I think they're going to sign. I would imagine they're going to sign probably a veteran. They're definitely. I think they're going to sign a Darius Williams and Saron Neal, a player like the players that have been linked to the Giants who have meetings with them tomorrow. I'm imagining they're going to come away with a defensive back. But what's the priority now for safety in the draft if you don't find somebody that is really capable to start opposite of Jason, or a definitive starter? Or maybe they just add a veteran and then have him battle it out with Dane Belton to be the starter.
I think it's more going to be what you just said. they're going to add something in free agency that they feel can fit Shane Bowen's system. Maybe draft and date, maybe still the draft. I think for the draft, like it's hard for me to say if they're going to draft a safety early or at any point or not, because I think the draft doesn't go like that. I know some fans view the draft like that. Like you take O-line round 1, you take this round 2, you take that round 3. These are our needs. We go 1, 2, 3. But that's not how good GMs do it. They don't just take positions. They draft the best player available, and they hope and they prioritize positions of need to an extent. It's probably secondary. And they also prioritize position of value. They're not just going to take, if it's greatest fullback in the history of draft, they're not going to take him with the first overall pick because he's the best player available. They're going to factor those things in as well. But Shane didn't pay for a homegrown 24-year-old talent at the safety position. It tells me I don't think Shane's the type of drafter who's using that second round pick they still have left, or obviously the first round pick, but that second round pick that they still have left for safety. And I got to be honest with you, Nick, I'm actually personally not a big believer in drafting safeties early. I've come off, look, if you can get value like the Ravens did, like we knew that based on his film with Kyle Hamilton, do it. Like he's falling in round 1. What'd you say?
I think he was my number 1 player that draft.
You loved him, and his tape was amazing. Like if you can get value that's falling, fine. Antoine Winfield Jr., an amazing pick. And to an extent, McKinney was a value that fell. Fine. If that's the case and it falls into your lap, you do it. But there's so many more misses at safety when I see these day 2 picks. The kid on the Jets, who I thought was going to be good, out of Cal, Ashton Davis, the list goes on and on of round 2 and round 3 busts at the safety position. And that goes for a lot of D-backs. D-back's a tough position to hit on. It's I believe it's the hardest position to play in the NFL. I know there's other people who disagree. Well, outside of tight end. Tight end is actually the hardest position to play because you have to block and run routes and catch. That's insanely hard to do. And you have to block like ends, edge players at the NFL level at tight end. That's crazy. But, I'm not dying to draft a safety, Nick. I'm just going to say that, to be honest, early, I should say, with that round 2 pick. But I will say this, as far as what they did from an allocation of resources, they essentially traded Leonard Williams' expiring contract, lost 7 picks to go from 39 to 47, or 8 picks to go from 39 to 47, and paid Brian Burns instead of Xavier McKinney. That's essentially what they've done here. They paid a trench player in the edges, and they swapped second round picks essentially from 39 to 47 because Leonard Williams was an expiring contract anyway.
And Carolina would have had, oh gosh, man, that's crazy. That's crazy. Sometimes sometimes when you have a trade on the table and you don't pull the trigger.
The Panthers with the Rams. Yeah. God, I mean, they could have got 2 first round picks from the Rams. They got a 2 and a 5.
I know. And a complete rebuild. So we got some of these supers we got to get to real quick.
Yep.
Matt Peliquin, thank you so much. He says all moves are irrelevant until they get the quarterback. I disagree, but I welcome that opinion. We do need to find a quarterback, but I think the building the team and establishing a sound infrastructure allows you to go out and get a quarterback, and it puts a rookie quarterback in a position to now where he doesn't have to worry about everything. And I'm not sure if that's what the Giants are doing right now, but adding Brian Burns is not a move where you're like, this team's completely rebuilding. I agree. Signing offensive linemen is not something we're like, oh, we're going to suck next year. I don't know if that's going to be the Giants' plan, right? So I really just look at that 6th pick. I'm not 100% certain what they're going to do, but oh man, it's going to be exciting nonetheless.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, Joe Schoen, I got a lot to say on this, Matt. And, generally speaking, Matt, you've listened to the podcast long enough to know that I generally agree with the idea that there's no actual true ceiling for your team on a year-to-year basis without good quarterback play. But as far as every move being irrelevant until then, no. If you can get core players like Burns in the mix, you get core players. And if you could build out an offensive line that could provide stability, you put that quarterback, when you finally get one, if you finally get one, in a much better position, like Nick said. So I'm not totally for that either. Obviously, though, I do agree with you. Until they upgrade quarterback, there is no, in my mind, there's no actual Super Bowl ceiling. They can be playoff contender.
Seize the moment. Thank you so much for the super. Zach Moss, Aaron Jones, any takers? Cameron Curl or Simmons? Also, Burns' contract tells me Daniel frickin' Jones is going to be gone. Also, Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr. at 6 and come back and get Penix, LFG. How you feel?
A lot of questions there. I think with Devin Singletary signed, they won't sign Moss or Jones. I think that's over. I don't think Curl or Simmons is going to be a Giant. Both players are going to get deals very close, I think, to what McKinney got. Less because of the age, but closer than you think. And I don't think the Giants have any more cap space for any more big moves at this point. We got to understand, trading for and signing Burns to a big contract, like you say, seize the moment, is big for the Giants from a cap standpoint. They now have 3 core players in Thomas, Dex, and Burns that are making crazy amounts of money against the cap. A lot of teams don't have that in their future. And so they're not really in a position right now to sign another player like Curl or Simmons in my mind. So I would say no. And as far as does the Burns contract speak to Jones's future, I think it does. I don't think the Giants can envision a scenario with Burns, Dexter Lawrence, and Andrew Thomas under contract in 2025 and in 2026, 2 years down the line, especially with those contracts structured the way they were in year one by Joe Schoen to kick back some cap hits to future years. And I'll be honest with you, I'm sure the way the Burns contract is going to get structured, Nick, is also pushing back. If I'm Joe Schoen, I'm structuring it in a certain way where most of the cap comes in 2025 or 2026, I should say, when Jones's contract is fully off the books, right? Jones has 22 million dead cap next year for 2025 if they cut him. And he has another, what is it? You said it was 25 million if he gets injured and doesn't pass his physical for 2025. Is that what you said, Nick? It would be like 50 million total in dead cap.
I think it. I don't know the
I
exact.
think I saw 25 and 22, so like 47.
It's a situation you don't want to find yourself in.
No, you don't want him to have to pay that injury guarantee out. But point being, like, I'm sure Joe Schoen is going to structure the contract with most of Burns' cap hit coming in 2026 because that's when Jones is off the books. It's either that or Jones has a $58 million cap hit in 2026. Like, in what world are they allocating $58 million of cap space to a quarterback that's put what he's put on tape and put what he's put on statistics, every advanced stat and raw stat as well? They're all bad across the board.
Exactly. And I love how he mentions Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. at 6 and then says Penix, but doesn't list Penix's teammate, Rome Odunze, which would also be a fun little
I got to be honest with you. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
No, I'm just like, again, I don't want to commit to Penix. I love how he throws the football, but I think there are aspects of his game that I really need to dive into with the tape and to break down. I'm going to get to them probably soon, actually, once I get.
I like how Penix throws the football, and I think he threw the football better than most people I saw at the combine. If throwing the football was the only thing that mattered, I would like Penix. But there are a lot of issues with Penix that I don't like. I don't like his injury history at all. I don't like his footwork and his movement skills in the pocket and, of course, out of the pocket. And I don't like his timing on the routes and the inbreakers in the middle of the field. He was great outside the numbers last year. He was great over the top, Penix. That seems amazing. But it's a lot easier in my mind to be great outside the numbers and over the top at the collegiate level. And I think a lot of the space that you're afforded the collegiate level in the Pac-12 is on the outside, specifically outside the numbers we're talking about, and then over the top. You're not afforded at the NFL level. But what you always can do at the NFL level, if your timing is good and your ball placement is good and your velocity is good, is utilize the middle of the field. That's how Josh Allen wins. That's how Mahomes wins. That's how Burrow wins. It's those timing in breaking routes. And that's something I thought I didn't like from what I've seen so far in Penix. And he's the next quarter. I still have to watch JJ. I haven't watched a lot of JJ. I've now done 4 quarterbacks. I still want like another game or 2 on Penix, but I'm not going to be as high in Penix as most, Nick, to an extent where I'd almost even rather consider some other quarterbacks that aren't really being discussed after those big 3 or 4 guys.
Burns, a two-way defender. Can he help on all 3 downs? From my understanding, he's a better run defender than people give him credit for. Yes. But I haven't had my eyes on that. So it's something I would circle back later in the week, Renee.
Yeah, I think it's a totally different player, for example, than like Bryce Huff, who got a big contract with the Eagles today. He's more of just situational one-way edge rusher that you're hoping can develop as a two-way player. I think Burns is already a two-way defender. He may not be Michael Strahan out there dominant as a run defender as well, but I think he's not somebody you have to worry about setting the edge. But we'll see. I'll have to watch the tape too on that one.
Do you think the Giants go wide receiver at 6? I think they go wide receiver, or they could possibly go quarterback, or they could possibly trade up. Those would be my betting favorites right now, right? Like, what would even be the third trade down, I guess, right?
I would say that given what they did in free agency today with Eluemunor and just the investment they made in Neal, I think this might mean Joe Alt is out of the mix for the Giants at 6, because that's the other consideration besides trading down. Would they go Joe Alt there? Now, back to that question for a second. I would say wide receiver at 6 is very likely, but I've heard so much smoke about the Giants wanting a quarterback in this class and going to get their quarterback.
So much gas, right?
So much gas, man. And so I wouldn't be surprised to hear they trade up to 3 to get their quarterback if the Patriots for some reason want to do that. I don't know if they would. And I also wouldn't be surprised, and the hope for me, this is how I'm hoping this thing falls, Nick, is that the Patriots fall in love with McCarthy and the Washington Commanders fall in love with Jaden Daniels. And the Giants can maybe just sit at 6 and get Drake May. But now this is what comes into the mix. You know, the end of the season when we were all like, who cares that the Giants won the last game of the season? And who cares that the Chargers weren't able to beat the Chiefs backups, which is still annoying to me. Whatever. It moves the Giants to 6. It moves the Chargers up to 5. Who cares? Well, the Giants might care at some point because if the draft falls the way I just said, Nick, McCarthy goes at 3, Daniels at 2, Caleb at 1, Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4. Now that 5th pick becomes a big trade spot for the Chargers. And the Giants may have to give up assets to move from 6 to 5 to get who they want if it is a quarterback and if it is a Drake May. And so now you're just dumping assets for that last win versus the Chargers' last loss. So I don't blame the Giants. They beat the Eagles. And again, you have to play to win. Players play to win. Coaches coach to win. You have to win. But long term, these wins aren't great at the end of these seasons. It's hard for me to imagine that they are, especially when your locker room changes as much as the Giants change from this offseason to the next with Barkley going.
Tom Ty, Nick, your mustache is 9 out of 10. It would be a perfect 10 if you add the soul patch. Oh, geez, would you hang out with me if I had a soul patch with this mustache? Go Big Blue. Thank you, Tom Ty.
Yeah, I would still hang out with you. I don't give a crap about any of that stuff. But a soul
Probably
patch would
single.
be cool.
I would imagine that Diana
would break up with you if you had a soul patch.
I mean, she doesn't like the mustache. This is a temporary thing. It's just, when do I have the opportunity where I shave my gigantic beard and I just have this mustache on my face? I'm just like, of course I'm going to rock it for a little bit and see how I feel.
I wish you had kind of like done it a little differently. I like it this way, but like where it's like you cut it in a certain way where it's like longer down there and you could do like that with, you know what I'm talking about? Like you could have like.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah. I mean, I probably could have, but like, I don't really have the hair. Like my hair is not great for that. Like you can do it with any type of gel, but I have very coarse, very thick, like Middle Eastern type of hair. So it doesn't like really like, it's not as like fine. You know what I'm saying? It's like more. It's a little bit difficult. It could work though, but it would have been a weird look. If I didn't do it, I would be walking around with like, just like, it would be like,
yeah, I got you. It would have taken more grooming.
16 months ago, Steve Ellison,
by the way. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much. 16 months ago. Thank you for your donation. The Rams offered 2 first-rounders and a second-round pick for the services of Brian Burns, and the Panthers declined. A 2-5 is a steal. Yeah. Market dipped, right? Pay up with the market dip like that. You are right, Steve. Victor Perez, thank you so much, says chances the Burns trade becomes Leonard Williams trade 2.0.
I mean, it's possible in the sense of just they traded a second-round pick and then re-signed the player to a big contract, but I don't foresee it happening this way. I personally never felt I liked Leonard Williams, and he was long and he was big, but I didn't feel like he had the upside as a pass rusher that Brian Burns had, or I don't even think it's even anywhere close as a pure pass rusher. And he played alongside Dexter Lawrence for a lot of his snaps to the Giants, and just that should be as easy as it gets for you to dominate from a statistical standpoint, and just never was there except for that one contract year that Nick, I know you brought that up a bunch, but like in the contract year for Leonard Williams, when the Giants traded for him, he had 1 million sacks, and then that production kind of slipped a little bit. He was still he was still a good player on tape. I wouldn't say he was ever elite. He's still a good player. The hope is that Brian Burns can be elite. But yes, there's a chance that this doesn't work out. That goes for any move ever. But I think it's less likely that it doesn't work out because I think what he brings off the edge is going to fit really well what Shane Bowen wants to do from a schematic standpoint.
Just needs to stay healthy. Knock on wood. Chris, thank you so much for your donation. Says, do you think what we did free agency set up take wide receiver at 6? Yeah, I think it could set that up, but I also can't rule out quarterback because Giants are in need for a quarterback for the long term.
I would say this though, some players we've considered, I know you watched a little bit of tape on, Jared Verse players on the edge are probably out of the mix now for the Giants with the 6.
Yeah. I don't even know if they were really realistic.
It might have not been in the first place, but that just takes another position off the board. I think tackle, and I think it really is going to come down to wide receiver or quarterback for the Giants.
Yeah, that's what it's really looking like, which is exciting, right? And there was a down for us a little bit. Are you guys, John, thank you so much for the donation. He says, are you guys okay with our linebacker group outside of Okereke? If not, do you think we should draft one or sign one? Another note that I wanted to mention, we did re-sign Gunnar Olszewski, kick returner, and Carter Coughlin, who's technically a linebacker. But I would say I'm okay with it. But I could definitely be encouraged or enticed, I should say, to add another linebacker because Micah McFadden, I think he can be a starter. I like it, but I want a good contingency plan if something were to go wrong. So give me depth, a very cheap linebacker, or maybe a day 3 pick. And then I would be okay. Very, very strongly, Okereke is a good guy to have there. But McFadden, I'm not sold on really.
That's fair. I would say for me, it's day 3 or UDFA for my interest. The reason being, I'm not sold on McFadden, but I like the step forward he took last year. I went from thinking, and I know you do too, Nick, but I
Yeah.
went from thinking before the year that he's just not going to have the foot speed to play at the NFL level, to thinking, okay, he actually showed really good signs, and it wasn't just moving forward. He showed some interesting signs in coverage as well
Yeah.
that had me like intrigued by him. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm right there with you. Like, I like him, but it's just, is he actually the guy? He needs to clean up those missed tackles.
Does
One thing I will say though is, if you're a veteran and the market kind of dries up, you're looking at the Giants depth chart and you're saying, I can earn snaps and beat out Micah McFadden to start next to Bobby Okereke with Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Kayvon Thibodeau on defense. And I can leverage that into getting a contract
true,
next offseason on a cheap 1 year, $1.8 million deal or something like that. So
true.
that's kind of where I'm at with the veteran or the free agent. I'm not
Okay.
looking for like a 3-year, $20 million deal or anything like that.
I'm
Obviously.
intrigued by that idea, Nick. I think that's a pretty good idea, especially with the thought process of they'd be playing behind that D line, and that's kind of a value proposition the Giants can offer them. So I'm open to that as well for sure.
Seize the moment, says Howie is on tilt. Yes, Howie is he's on something. I'll tell you that much. I don't know if it's tilt or is tilt a is that a code word for something?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
is it just
We've
mad?
talked about this so many times. Tilt. Remember I told you tilt is like a big poker lingo?
No, I know that, but I'm
Oh,
saying,
oh, oh.
is it like a term for something else?
No. Just you can go on tilt naturally. You don't have to be it doesn't have to be drug induced tilt. Just be natural tilt. Ask anyone who's ever played poker with me. I've gone on sober tilt rants thousands of times.
I go
So
on tilt playing Catan. I was on
you
tilt
do go
playing
on
Catan
tilt
probably
playing
yesterday,
anything.
man.
You're a
Yeah.
very tilted player in general in any game that you play. So
Oh
am
yeah.
I. I'm worse than you, but it is what it is. As far as how he goes, he's going all in. And I just find it so interesting how the Eagles manipulate the cap, Nick. Like, they went out today, they signed Bryce Huff, right? They signed Saquon Barkley, right? And they may not be done. Like, we may hear another massive trade or move that they did. So I just think it's interesting how they manipulate the cap, and at some point they'll have to pay the price. You would think.
Pay the piper. Larry Edelstein, thank you so much for the donation, brother. Says it's fine for Saquon to go to the Eagles. His body, his life, it's his business. Also, it's fine for us to
Yeah, sure.
revile him now. We're loyal fans of the New York Football Giants.
I think it's
Absolutely,
fair.
Larry. Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think fans should be like. I don't think it should ever be like you cannot be mean to a player. You cannot revile. It's a fan. Like that. Saquon has to know. He knows. He should at least have thick enough skin to understand. Like this is going to happen now. When he comes to Giant Stadium, it's going to happen. He's not going to get the reception he expects. That's my guess, Nick. I do not think he's getting cheered
No,
Saquon
of course
Barkley
not.
for his
Of
first
course
game
not.
with the Eagles against the Giants in MetLife. I think that's going to be booze.
I think there's one person who'll probably be cheering him. Will. He'll definitely be cheering.
I thought you were going to say Dave Gettleman.
No, Dave Gettleman, I don't know what he's up to these days. Jay Ferris, thank you so much. He just says Brian Burns, and then he follows up. And I really want to thank you, Jay Ferris. This means a lot.
Thank
He
you
says,
so
I
much.
want to show support Crypto Farees. Excited about you guys in your future. Thank you so much.
Dude, thank you so much for the big donation. And obviously, Crypto, I see you on Twitter a lot. We'll keep talking Giants there.
All the time, baby. D-Kit, thank you so much, brother. Says, I'm excited to see how this changes our approach to the draft after we take a quarterback. Do we focus on wide receiver or cornerback at 47?
Well,
I think
D-Kit is excited. He thinks we're getting quarterback in round one.
I know. I love it, dude. So I think the Giants are probably going to still add a corner, as I've said. And I don't think that precludes them from selecting one at 47, especially in this deep corner class.
I will say this, D-Kit. From how I view the board right now, and a lot is going to change. It's still only March 11th. Nick and I have probably the bulk of our work to do as far as learning these prospects. Value-wise, and I'm always about value, especially if you can match value with need and value with a position of value. So those three things. I think wide receiver is going to be the best available player on the board for the Giants at 47. So if they go quarterback in round one, like you're saying in your scenario, I think wide receiver is going to be staring them right in the face and being like, we got a new quarterback. We have this great value play here at receiver that just fell to 47 because, it's such a deep wide receiver class. Let's take a wide receiver. But I also wouldn't be surprised if it's an offensive lineman. It's a great offensive line class as well. And if somebody falls into that range that wasn't supposed to on the offensive line, it's just not going to surprise me if the Giants go offensive line there either. So there's a lot of positions that I think could be in play. The one that I think is not in play anymore, but I could be wrong about, would be edge.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, especially since, as Peter Randazzo says, Ojulari, third down specialist. Yeah. And I think
and that's good. Like we said, like this might be what he needs to get his career back on track, to not have to play every snap and to, maybe have an ability to keep himself healthy that way.
Ian Ernest, thank you so much for the donation. He says, hey, fellas, I know it's early, but worst case scenario, if the draft goes 3 quarterbacks, Marvin Harrison Jr., Neighbors, who would you take? I'm pretty nervous about trading up. I think in that situation, I'm okay with Odunze. From what I understand about him and from all the tape that I have seen on him, yeah, he might not create as much separation as Neighbors, but he could still create separation. He's a 50-50 type of guy as well. And I think he has the makeup to play in New York. And everything that I've seen from him is something that I'm like, yeah, I would like to have this guy on our team. So
Yeah,
that's where I'm at there.
I'm fresh off of watching Odunze because I've started to watch some Washington, which you get Penix, you get Odunze, you get a few of those other receivers, and you get a lot of potential.
Fontenot,
Fontenot too. Like he's so smooth on his feet. But I did fall for a Pac-12 tackle who was super smooth on his feet before, so I have to be careful with that.
He tore his Achilles.
I know the kid with the Eagles draft. I'm forgetting his name now. I don't know why.
Andre Dillard.
Dillard, and yeah, he tore it, so that's fine. But as far as what you said, like Odunze, I think the separation stuff is overstated and overrated, and I think it's dead wrong. When I watch him, I think he creates separation, especially in the red zone. Like vertical separation, will that translate to the NFL level? I'm not exactly positive, but I think he does things really well, like stack the defensive back that just like he can win vertically. It just has to be the right kind of quarterback who throws him passes that, don't look like he's open, but you can throw him open or you could give him a chance to make a play on the ball. And so the Giants need to get a quarterback if they get Odunze that fits that skill set in my mind. Because once you do that, if you take Odunze at 6 or Dunze at 6, I think it's Odunze. If you take Odunze at 6, and somebody, by the way, sent me the right pronunciation of this to my DM a couple weeks ago, and now I already forget what he sent me, but I'm pretty sure it's Odunze. If you take Odunze at 6, you're building your pass game around that player, in my opinion, and around his skill set. You don't have to just draft a quarterback for that, but you want to get a quarterback who has the skill set that can give him a chance to make plays on 50-50 balls, something the Giants haven't had at the quarterback position since they drafted Daniel Jones. It's not a knock on Jones. That's a reality. He doesn't throw up 50-50 balls a lot on the outside. And so he doesn't take those chances. He likes to wait for the receiver to get open. That's it. Again, it's not an opinion. It's not mean. It's just the right thing. So anyway, what was I going to say to you, Nick? Yeah. So if they go Dunze at 6, that's fine. Sorry, I got caught up on a comment. But I think it's also in play that they could take McCarthy, Nick, at 6, and we'll have to see what happens there.
Alex B, thank you so much. He says, love the pod. Draft curveball. Could the Giants trade up for Marvin Harrison Jr.? Generational talent, better pass blocking. I know, crazy, but fun to think about. I think they would be okay with it, maybe, but I think they also probably like all 3 of those wide receivers, so they wouldn't want to give up assets to do it. And I also don't know if the Cardinals, just presuming that it is the Cardinals that the Giants would be trading up with, would want to pass on the opportunity to select Marvin Harrison Jr. But I'll entertain any draft scenario at this point, man. It's draft season. It's fun. Free agency. Giants just got Brian Burns. But yeah, I don't really think it's likely.
That's a nice. I like that we get curveball. So thank you, Alex B. It is a curveball. We haven't really considered much. Would the Giants trade up for Marvin Harrison Jr.? I would guess they wouldn't. I would guess if they trade up, it's probably only going to be for a quarterback.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. D Kit, thank you so much again, D Kit. He says, Dan, I'm not with you on Penix. He's deadly accurate, has a huge arm, has a very high football IQ, and most importantly, will give the wide receivers a chance. The negatives you've mentioned are coaching points that can be addressed.
See, I agree with you on all those things. And by the way, I'm not out on Penix. He's just not I'm just not that in on him. I agree with you on all those things, but I don't agree with that the negatives are coaching points that can be addressed. His footwork is not, I'm not talking about his footwork's good from when he throws the football. And that's a different kind of footwork. So when I say his footwork that I'm concerned with, it doesn't mean his footwork, what base he throws them. I'm talking about his footwork in the pocket when it comes to manipulating the pocket, resetting the pocket, and getting through the muck. That's what scares me. And then when I talk about his foot speed, that is not going to be coached up. You have what you have from a foot speed standpoint. And then when it comes to timing on those throws over the middle, I guess that can be coached up, but I've been hearing that for years about a lot of the quarterbacks that just don't end up getting better in these regards. To me, that requires I remember when Brian Dable came over, Nick, I heard a podcast with Cassell who was like, I'm interested to see this fit with the Giants, and it was either Cassell or one of those good film guys, but he's like, when you watch Josh Allen tape, a lot of the time he's just kind of catching the snap, hanging back there in the pocket for as long as he possibly can, letting the pressure get all to him, and then back foot ripping a dig route or back foot ripping an in-breaker. And that requires timing, velocity, and ball placement, and it requires the ability to do it from a muddy pocket with no ability to set your feet, get your base and shoulder squared and rip into the throw. Like that is a special quarterback. So those are the issues. That's when I saw Penix struggle when he had to hit those timing routes on the in-breakers when the pocket was muddy. That is like when he's off his back foot. Does he have a huge arm? Yeah. Is it Josh Allen or anywhere close when it comes to ripping those inbreakers, or Justin Herbert in that regard? Not even close, not even remotely close in that regard. So there's
Frankie
some.
baby.
Oh,
Frankie
that's Frankie
baby.
Bagels, by the way. I usually
Oh, it's
thank you, Frankie Bagels. Shout out
uh
Frankie Bagels. I'm trying to get Nick over to Church Street Bagels, and anyone who's seen my Twitter knows I've shouted out Church Street Bagels. I wear the shirt a lot on the show, so hopefully he's
dude.
still listening and he gets the shout out here.
Yo, I'm gonna go over there and he's the owner, right?
He's the owner.
Damn. I need to go over there and grab some bagels before I vacate this state. What town is it in?
It is in Denville, actually. I said Dover. It's in
Oh,
Denville. Yeah.
okay.
Right.
Nice.
You know where Pasta Shop is? It's right by Pasta Shop.
Yeah, we went to
You guys
Pasta
should,
Shop together.
and if you go, tell him Dan sent you. You want to speak to the owner. Everything's good on that menu. The bagels are actually like, this is not just because he's my friend. He actually has unbelievable bagels. But to get the Chipotle melt, that's what I would get, the breakfast sandwich Chipotle melt. But ask for it on a bagel. It's a little sloppier, but again, I'm just a big fan of bagel over rolls. This is the whole thing for me, Nick. When it comes to breakfast sandwich, I don't want a roll. I want a bagel.
Yeah, I'm there with you when I indulge as well. Peter Redonza, thank you so much. He says, "Give me Xavier Leggett at 47. That is the wide receiver from South Carolina." And then he also follows up and says, "Odunze is AJ Brown 2.0." I
I
hope
don't
if the Giants get him.
I don't agree with that, but I don't hate it. I don't see much AJ Brown. Do you see AJ Brown watching him?
From what I've seen, not necessarily,
It's a
but
different kind of prospect. Yeah.
it is. Yeah. AJ Brown, man, the fact that like he fell to the second that's something I think the NFL learned from
Criminal.
the NFL learned from the 2019 draft. They learned from him and DK Metcalf, and they were like,
Yeah.
we should probably shouldn't let that happen again. Now, DK
And those
Metcalf
are
had a
both
lot of
big projection picks, by the way, Nick.
yeah,
Both of them.
both out of Ole Miss. But DK had a lot of like injury issues too that a lot of people can't forget. That's one of the reasons why he slid that, and he had like a 8-second
three cone. Yeah, that first percentile 3 cone killed him.
Jay Ferris, thank you so much again, man. Like, dude, you're just knocking it out of the
really
park.
appreciate it, man.
He says, "We got Brian Burns. Let's get excited. Let's get excited." Yeah, no, I'm there with you, man. It's the thought process around having 2 pass rushers along with Dexter Lawrence, because Dexter Lawrence is that's a pass rusher in and of itself. And now you got 2 bookends on the edge. Just keep offenses and force them into third and long situations. You got those guys pinning their ears back. Color me excited. This is a team where you're going to need to be able to get after the passer with only 4, because Shane Bowen does not bring nearly as much pressure as Wink Martindale. Brian Burns is really going to help you with that.
Yes.
He's somebody you can get after the pass with 4. He's very agile, lateral agility, all that kind of stuff for the twists. And you align him in the middle, like you were saying, run a pirate stun. He's going to loop around the other 2 guys. It's going to be great.
Yeah, hopefully. I completely agree with you.
That's it.
Okay, that's all the time we have for on today. Thank you to all the people who listened in on this live show. We had 896 currently watching. We got over 1,000 at one point, which was incredible. The most we've ever had on this show. Super exciting times. I'm glad to see that happen. Thank you to everyone who supported the show. Thank you to everyone who donated to the show in the super chats. And more good content is coming. We're going to be keeping it live. We're going to do some more lives. Obviously, we like how this went. And then obviously once we get through free agency, it's heavy draft season. And that's when we're going to start to get really into some interesting content that I think you're only going to find here. We have 2 really good interviews coming up. They've both been rescheduled. I've teased both of them on this pod, but one is going to be with a former Giants player, and we're going to talk some X's and O's with him. We talk X's and O's with any guest we get on that can talk it. And the other is with a quarterback coach who's going to talk quarterback X's and O's.
We have another one. We have another one too scheduled.
We do have another one scheduled. I forgot about that one. And you have to remind me when that is, by the way, after the show. But just so I can get it in my calendar. But yeah, so those are don't quote me on them. Those are going to be, we're probably going to save them for slower times. I don't want them to get buried during free agency when the focus is on free agency. So probably more toward the end of March for those, but keep it locked and loaded. More content coming. Thank you again so much for everybody who supports us. It really does mean a lot. And it was crazy today to see over 1,000 people in here. So that was fun. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll talk to you soon.